All right, welcome everybody. I advanced a few slides, but that's okay. The first couple didn't say anything important. Welcome to the kickoff for the class of 2025. You are juniors. You just finished your first semester of junior year. The first thing is congratulations. It's a big deal. It's a hard time. And we're just really proud of you and all that came with the first semester. I am here. I am joined by a few other college comm counselors. If you guys just wanna wave, if you wanna unmute and say hello, that would be great.
Hello.
Tammy and Kat and Kathleen. It's like you're accepting an award. Awesome. I think that's it. That's on right now. Okay. So I'm going to go through a lot of things today. The point of today is to really hear the same thing all together regarding the college process, where we are now, and kind of what the hopes are for the next 4 to 5 months. The first half, I'm going to tell you some of the things that we're seeing, some of the bigger picture items in terms of colleges and what's going on in the admissions landscape. And the second part, I'm actually going to go through the different aspects of the process that we're going to be working on in the next 4 to 5 months. The first part is also going to be a little bit about expectations. So we're just going to kind of dive right in. So one of the things I think that we underestimate is big things that happen out in life that are actually really affecting the college process. And so the three big things I would say in terms of 2023 that were impacting some of the things we saw is one, test optional, right? It continues to happen. It is a very uncertain part of the process. It is harder for colleges to make some decisions. It leads to some randomness in terms of students who are admitted. So it just leads to uncertainty. We also saw the end of affirmative action, right? Which threw all colleges most of them had been operating on that front of asking questions about students' backgrounds. And they had to scramble and decide how they were going to do that, right? So it's another piece of the process that's totally new to colleges and they're kind of scrambling. And the last thing is AI, right? And so AI is there. We know the kids are using it. We know teachers are using it. We know everyone's using it. And so the colleges are also trying to figure out what they're going to do in this new landscape that has AI. And I would say all three of those things really lead to some uncertainty in the college process. And what you see at the bottom is that the essays are getting harder. Why? Because they want good essays that are personal, that are thoughtful, and very much like of the student so that they can make sure that it's not AI, right? That the kid didn't just type it in and drop it into their application and send it, right? With test optional, we're seeing, and uncertainty, I would say, there's still more applications coming in, right? Students are applying to a ton of colleges. It's not more students applying, it's more students applying to more colleges, right? That's leading to that piece. So colleges are then trying to figure out of all these new candidates, if they don't have tests and they don't have affirmative action, in terms of what they can ask on the application, right? And they're not sure if the students are writing the things that they're asking. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so this process is not super stable in terms of what we're seeing. It's also not super fair. So let's think a little bit about, from a college's perspective, this is what we saw in the cycle of 2023, and many of them are not new. They just continue to really impact the process. So harder essay questions, right? And the essay questions are related to things like community and diversity. Why? Because those are very personal and they're checking for AI, right? That the kids are really thinking about the questions. And also it's giving students an opportunity to share their background, right? When other parts of the application were taken away last year. We still have lowering acceptance rates. where there is a massive increase in the average SAT scores because only students with good scores are turning them in. Colleges are also looking at additional application requirements, right? So some of them are making kids, after they apply, fill in something called an SRAR, where they have to fill in their grades again, right? Even if they've done it on the Common Application, because those colleges want to look at their grades in different ways. And so they have the kids enter them in again. We're seeing, and I expect for 2024, we're going to see a lot more optional video supplements. Why? Because you can't fake them, right? And it's not done by AI. So, and some of those video supplements will be in the application in terms of options for students to do when they turn in their applications. Others are going to pop up after you apply and give you a real small deadline, like 48 hours, right? Because they also don't want it to be overly produced. There's still increased pressure for early decision. There's a lot of private schools that the majority of their students are admitted through early decision, which is binding. We are going to continue to see a ton of deferrals and lots of wait lists, right? And with that is also later early action notifications. So 4 years ago, I would say the majority of schools that had early action would let kids know before January 1st. And I would say this year, so many of the colleges pushed their timeline in terms of when they tell students whether they've been admitted to mid to late. And what that means is that students can't get their early information in a time frame by which they can make a decision or not apply to some schools' regular decision. We're also seeing a lot of schools that will offer students, you will be admitted, but your first semester, you're going to go abroad to a campus that the college has made, a deal with, or you're going to start second semester. That's a big, that's always been a big thing at USC. We see it at Northeastern, but more and more schools are doing this, right? Because they're trying to manage their enrollment. When they have uncertainty about who's going to come to their school, they have to be really careful that they don't over enroll, right? And not have housing and things like that. And that has happened a lot in the last couple of years. So there's a lot of things that colleges are doing to manage their enrollment. Again, none of these are new. We're just seeing a lot more of it. And we want our families to be prepared, right? Because sometimes you might get a yes from your dream school, but you have to start second semester, right? We just want you to know in advance that these are some of the things that we see. And they might be something that you have to deal with. What it's really done is just elongate the process, which is hard. So here's what we see in response, right? In terms of what we're seeing with students and families. Kids are applying to way too many schools, right? Kids are applying to 18, 20 schools because of the uncertainty. And the fact is that the applications are getting harder. Therefore, it's just too much work. And it leads to total burnout in terms of the students. There's a lot of feeling of anxiety because there's a little bit more uncertainty. We don't know where students are going to get it, right? And parents, gosh, I mean, I'm the first to admit, all I want to know is where I want to, where I need to start buying a plane ticket, right? I want to know the answer and I want to know early. But everything about this process is taking a much longer time. Students are coming in and they just are having a really hard time with the new questions. Again, they are hard and require kids to think deeply. And we are not currently in a cycle where we're doing that a lot with students. Students are totally tired, right? And sometimes that leads to dread, and sometimes it leads to procrastination and paralyzation. Like we see a lot of kids that just have a hard time making a decision or just have a really hard time getting into the process. Lots of students just have input overload. And specifically, a lot of times students have a hard time to find, like it's hard for them to find time, right, to do the college work that we're asking. So when I talk today about what we're asking students to do, I want you all to know that we're trying to boil it down to sort of the least amount that students have to do while also making progress. And in the end, it comes down to maybe half an hour a week. And I know that every student, if they worked really hard, could find half an hour. And I won't tell you how, but I definitely think if you look at your screen time on your phone, you can probably find something you can spend half an hour less on in a week to just make a little progress on the college process. Okay. What I think is important is also reiterating why we're here and what you have sort of joined in terms of College Comm and the college process. And I just pulled out, there's a lot of things that we believe, but I just pulled out 4 things that I think are really important for us to keep in mind. Where you go to college does not determine your success or happiness in life. I know it feels like that sometimes, right? You're never going to be successful unless you get into X school or X type of school. But all the research really shows it's about what you do when you get there. So as we approach this process, we're going to be giving you a lot of different ideas in terms of things that will take you to your goals or things that you want in this moment. All right, but it does not determine the rest of your life. College is the first step in growing into adulthood and you're building skills for life. So when we are doing things like preparing for interviews or building a resume or helping you with your time management skills, we're doing that to help you through the college process, but we're also doing that because those are the skills you need to be successful in college and beyond. So I think sometimes kids are like, oh, I don't, they're just having a hard time with the process. And I just want you to know that this is not for one single outcome, right? This is building good habits and learning the skills that you just need to be successful wherever you go. We will be your mentor, your guide, your cheerleader, right? We have a lot of ways to help streamline this process. We're also going to be asking tough questions, listening really carefully to what you're saying, and celebrating your success. Okay? We are all those things. And this one is really important, and I want you to keep this in mind as we go through the rest of the slides, because it is our job as counselors, right, to explain the spectrum of students or what it takes to get into highly competitive schools, right? But it's your job to decide what works for you and what's good for you. And so when you're working with your counselor, we want to hear from you. And we are always open to your suggestions. If you don't like our spreadsheet, build your own. Not a problem, right? Everything that we do here is to give you a start. And we just want to empower you to take it to whatever makes sense for you. I also want students to know that we don't actually care where you go to college. And I know that sounds really strange, but we want you to be happy and we want to find places that are a good fit and we are invested in what you want, right? But we're not trying to get statistics or things and you need to get into this school or that school, right? We're here to be your guide, your mentor, and your cheerleader for the process. And I have to say, every year I am just blown away because the students that we work with are incredibly talented. They have so many talents and strengths. Students that have 2.6s still have amazing talents and strengths, right? So our job is to focus on those strengths, help bring some of those things out, right? And help you make connections, right? Because it's those connections that ultimately are going to start to come together and be elaborated on your college application. Okay, So students, I want to make sure that you're really paying attention to this slide. And I apologize in advance because it is a really long slide. But the concept here is we're going to hold you to high expectations, but we are absolutely here to listen if you need us to change some things. Okay. So first and foremost, we need you to take responsibility for your own college process. We cannot want it more than you do. Right? So our expectation is that you will stay engaged, show some initiative, make some decisions, and meet deadlines. We also expect that you will keep an open mind, be willing to think, research, reflect, imagine, and consider trade-offs. We are just embarking on college research, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this process, we have to end up with a balanced college list, right? So sometimes we have to think outside of the box to balance that list. And we just hope that you're willing to at least indulge us in looking at some colleges that you think, you might not want to look at first glance. We expect you to do your work 24 hours in advance of your meeting. Concept here, i.e., thoughtfully doing your work. I want to let you know in a little secret, whenever I have an assignment from a student, so I read everything that students send me, if it's an essay or if they've worked on their resume or anything like that. I do it all in the morning before their session. The first thing I do is go in and look at what time you completed the assignment. Then, oftentimes, I go and I look at the previous version so that I can see what changes you've made. So I can tell oftentimes if a student did it at 2 a.m. and changed 5 words, you didn't really do the assignment. And so I'm going to have to talk about it again. And we don't have anything to go over in the session to be productive. So please try to do your work 24 hours in advance of your meeting. The other thing is that we do not charge for the time that we spend looking at your work. So if it's done 24 hours in advance, you're getting way more out of this program than if you do it 5 minutes before your session. We can't look at it. Now we have to spend the session time to go over it. Please respond to emails or texts within 48 hours. There are plenty of things that you're going to get that you don't need to respond to. But if it's something where we ask a question or we're trying to change a meeting time or checking in on an assignment or something like that, please try to respond within 48 hours. We oftentimes are responding to you in 24 hours or less. So we hope that you can do 48 hours. Maintain a high standard of integrity in the college process, right? All the writing for college applications should be your own original work, not your friends, not your parents, not your English teachers, and not AI. So keep that in mind. It's really important, and I want to reiterate, whether you're at a public school or a private school, it doesn't matter. You need to maintain communication with your high school counselor and follow the requests of whatever they ask you to do, right? Because if you don't do that, your transcript may not get sent and you may not end up meeting a deadline for one of your colleges. Okay, you need to be really careful. I know you're working with us. However, whatever your school asks of you is a top priority in terms of process. And the last one is acknowledge that there are no shortcuts in this process. It's hard for everyone, right? It doesn't matter if you've taken 15 AP courses and have, a 4.4, right? Or you have a 3.2. There are no shortcuts in this process. The work has to get done, and it's hard for everybody, okay? That being said, this is just kind of an idea, and this is definitely probably not true for everyone, but I tried to kind of do a little bit of a general approach here that thoughtfully applying to college will take 80 to 100 hours. Okay. Your personal statement is probably going to take 20 hours. Supplements is going to take at least 30 hours. Creating a balanced college list, the research, and going through, 35, 40 colleges could take up to 20 hours. 8 hours for other parts of the process, right? Filling out the application probably only takes you 6 hours. So the concept here is that, like, you know what? It's actually not that long of time. Like, if you wanted to, you could hammer this out in 3 weeks if you did nothing but college stuff. Okay. So it can get done. In reality, that's not the way it gets done. Right. And also, it's really hard to be super thoughtful if you're just like jammed into it and doing it 3 weeks straight. Right. So, what we're trying to do is break it down. And what we've done over the last 15 years is try to figure out the easiest way to break it down so that you don't have to do it all at once. Right. It's too daunting. We are trying to move through the process in a thoughtful way. So, the next 6 months, here's what we're working on. It's really the next 5 months, because when we get to June, there's a whole nother set of things we'll do. Talking about classes in your academic plan that prioritizes your interests, right? And sets you up for majors that you're interested in, or, making sure that you're maximizing your classes for the types of schools you want to apply to. An official test score, right? So that we can see, is this going to be a big part of your process, and kind of try to make a plan for that. Okay. If you are totally opposed and know that you're not going to do testing, that's okay, right? We just need to talk about it. So we'll be talking about that in the next 3 to 4 months. We want a completed resume that includes everything that you're doing, that you can use to apply for a job, that you can use to upload to your college applications, that you will also use as your basis for the activity section of your applications. We want you to have some concrete summer plans. And the rest of the presentation will tell you why. By the end of this 6 months, we want you to have a balanced college list. And we also want you to start demonstrating interest. So we're going to talk about all those things briefly. How we're going to get the work done, right? So we have asked you at a bare minimum to make an appointment once a month, one-on-one with your counselor. Okay? Bare minimum. Sometimes we give you May off if it's really hard with AP exams. January, kickoff meeting, extra time. Great. So glad you're here. February, I will be doing a workshop any student can attend. The first one's going to be on activities and resume. And you know what? We're going to hammer out that resume. We're going to talk through all your activities. We're going to have you do drafts so that you're really starting to understand how to put your best foot forward on paper when talking about your activities. There will be 2 sessions. One will be in the morning. It will be in San Carlos. It will be in person. One will be in the afternoon. It will be online. If you are local, I highly, highly recommend that you try to come in person, because I think you're going to get a lot more out of it. However, if there's certain things, you're traveling for sports or you are not local, we will have a virtual version. Okay. If for some reason you can't attend either, you are responsible for watching the recording and coming to your next meeting in March with a completed resume, right? Or a draft. The other thing that often goes into February, March, and even April is some college visits. You will get, there'll be newsletters on that. We have blogs on that. I'm not going to go too deep into that. But recognize that this is a really good time to start to see schools. It doesn't mean that you have to spend a ton of money and go across the country and see 15 schools. It could be seeing local schools, but kids need to get out and see what campuses are like. March, there is another workshop. This one's going to be about college list. And this is the primary purpose of this is going to be to start to generate colleges for you to research to start balancing out your list. So we will be looking at where your list is now, what you're liking, and thinking, okay, where do you need to add some schools, right? And finding some schools for you to research so that ultimately you're getting closer to a balanced list. Okay, April, 1 meeting. If you want to come in more and you want to get ahead of the process and your second semester junior year allows you to do that, we're on board. Book another session. Totally fine. Okay, May. June and July. You will get all the things for scheduling for summer when our schedules are open for summer. But the concept is you're still going to have one-on-one sessions. They'll be more frequent in the summer. And then either in May or June or July, you will be writing your personal statement. You will be getting information on this later on. I don't want to bog you down with this. We use a process that takes 4 weeks, or at least that's the plan. Most kids can get it. So depending on what's going on with your summer, we'll schedule that and get that going. But your essay is going on, and then you are also meeting with us about all the other parts of the process. In June and July, and if it has to be August because of scheduling, that's fine. Students will be submitting a presentation, and they will be presenting their college list to their counselor and their parents. And we will give you a list of what needs to be included in the presentation. But essentially, students are going to be defending their list and telling us why the schools are on there. And we'll be talking about it, and then a lot of other things as we start to finalize the list. But I want students to know that some of the assignments we're going to do in the spring are so that you can start to build this presentation. And then in August, we're going to have a 3-day boot camp. It'll be right before school starts. We're still kind of working on exact schedule. I think it's the 7th, 8th, and 9th. But we'll wait for a few more schools to have their fall schedule set. And that boot camp is going to be all about finishing the Common App, writing supplemental essays, and really just getting ahead of the process. Then we typically are meeting with you every week once school starts senior year. Okay, this slide is a little overwhelming. Again, I'm very, very sorry about this. Oh, my other side note. In the chat, I put the link to the Google Doc or the Google form for students to sign up for those workshops. So students, if you want to click on that and look at those and choose your workshop, it's the 2 workshops, one in February, one in March. Again, there's a morning session in person and an afternoon session that's going to be online. So you can go ahead and sign up for those. When I talk about in terms of, spending maybe 30 minutes a week on college stuff, those workshops, if you go, are 3 hours. You have done your work for the month, right? It's another way to get the stuff done if you're having a hard time fitting it in week by week. Okay. All right, communication. I just want to let you know where stuff is coming from so that we make sure that everybody can communicate. Okay. So Council Moore, that's where the students list is. That's where their assignments come from. There's a lot of research tools in there. All of their documents are in there, and then their documents are basically in a Google folder as well. Okay, so this is what we use to organize the process. Emails. There's 2 ways that they come. One is through Council Moore, and one is directly from your counselor. Okay. If it's a big thing, like I actually sent something out today to remind you of this meeting, it's coming from notifications@councilmoore.com. So make sure that that stuff is coming through for you. These are meeting recaps, right? After we meet with students, we are letting you know what happened and what needs to happen. Please read these write-ups. This is not group information. This is specific to you, or if you're the parent, to your student. And we spend a lot of time on this to make sure that you are informed on exactly what needs to happen. The other thing that goes out through Council Moore is reminder on assignments. And you can also email us directly through Council Moore too. Okay, if there's a newsletter, it's going to go through MailChimp. And typically we send a newsletter once a month. This month's newsletter will be about summer programs and how to think about a meaningful summer. And that will go out at the end of the month. You will also get a MailChimp newsletter format email tomorrow, Friday, with this recording. So if you aren't getting these things, a lot of times they go to junk. But know that that's coming. And if you don't see it, you can certainly email me or your counselor, and we'll try to problem solve as to why you're not getting it. Text, right? You got a text reminder that this meeting was happening. I typically send out a text when I send out a newsletter so that everybody can make sure that it's there, just in case it goes to junk and things like that. I do not care if both parents are on newsletters and texts. We only need one. So if one parent is not into it and never going to read it, feel free to unsubscribe. Just make sure you tell your spouse or significant others so that you don't both unsubscribe. There's blogs, right? So we do write blogs about specific parts of the process. They're usually just an elaboration of what the newsletter's on. So you can always go to our website and see the blogs. Appointments. 3 of us use Acuity and other counselors use other things. So just get clear with your counselor about how you're supposed to schedule meetings so that you know exactly how you need to be doing that. And then the last thing is all billing comes through Square. And most everybody should have gotten a bill earlier this week from Square. It'll come in with a reminder. Okay. So that's communication. It's a lot, but the point is we want to make sure you have all of the sort of up-to-date things that we're talking about. It also reinforces what we're talking about in the session with your student. Students, I love you. And we love you very much, but sometimes you don't communicate so well to your parents about what's happening. So we like to have backup. Okay. I'm going to dive into some stuff, and I want to make sure my first things I want to say is, hey, students, don't freak out. Okay, just take a deep breath. There's a lot here, but this is what we're going over, and we're going to go over in our sessions over the next 6 months. So I don't want it to be over. I'm trying to give an overview. I'm not trying to overload. Okay. We talked about some of the bigger parts of the process, and now there will be some things that are a little bit more like nitty gritty. No matter where you are, we are going to support you. Okay. All of our students have tons of options, right? In terms of choosing the college. My most successful student this year in early action had a 3.4 and very limited APs and got into 6 schools and got a lot of merit aid. All of you are going to find a great place to go to college. Okay. So academics and majors. This is when I was talking about explaining the spectrum. And so in terms of getting to know where you are on the spectrum, the first thing is I always need to remind students, you are in the 6th semester, right? The 2nd semester of junior year of a 6 semester total. When you apply to college, the majority of your colleges, right? You will be sending the GPA at the end of this semester. So make this semester count. Okay. We will be talking about looking at your schedule and maintaining rigor for your senior year. We will talk about AP exams. If you're going to be taking them, having good scores is a good thing. It's something you can share on your application. Okay. It should be a time for also making connections with your teachers. You're going to need at least 1, but potentially 2 letters of recommendation. So this is a really good semester to kind of hone in, and we'll be talking about it in our sessions. In terms of the GPAs, this is one of those things where it's our job to show the range, right? And it's your job to investigate a little bit more, kind of figure out where you are and where you want to be. So what I've put up here are the grade summaries for 2 students in the Sequoia Union High School District. I believe they're Woodside students, but the message is the same for whether it's Carlmont or Sequoia, right? So these are 2 students that, for all intents and purposes, student on the top had 2 B+ in 6 semesters. Okay. And took some AP courses. Their weighted GPA is a 4.1, almost 3, which is amazing, right? It's a really strong GPA, and they did very well. couple of B's, and some rigor. Okay. The student at the bottom, right, had straight A's and a lot of rigor, right? They were the same class. It is not this year's class. It is not last year's class. This is from a while back, right? So student number 2 has a 4.34, right? So if you're not taking into account rigor, these students look a little bit the same, right? And so what we're trying, the reason I put these 2 slides up is to say that these students aren't the same and colleges are not going to look at them the same, right? The student at the bottom took, 10 AP courses, and the student on the top only took a couple. And that's how you see the differences in the GPAs. But if student number 1 doesn't know the range of GPAs at their high school, right? The 4.21 at this school is very different than at a private school, right? The ranges are really different. And so we want you, and we will talk with students and ask us students to talk with you about sort of where your GPA may sit within the range of the students at your school. Because that is important. You are read within context. Okay, so the student on the bottom, right, for all intents and purposes, is maxing out the curriculum. And if the question, is this student going to an Ivy League? No, they did not get into an Ivy League. But they did max out their curriculum and had straight A's. Okay, so we want to talk about range and figure out where you are, right? There's a broad spectrum in terms of GPAs. The next is about majors, and we're going to be talking a lot with students about this, and we want to make sure that these conversations are also happening at home, because majors are getting trickier in terms of colleges, because some of the bigger public schools have to pay a lot more attention because they don't have as much space or as much, capacity to have students changing majors all the time. Right. So I pulled this up. This is from UC Irvine, but to be honest, this is what we see sort of at most schools, specifically, definitely the UCs, but in general, the kids are coming in and these are the types of things that they want to apply for in this process, right? Biological sciences, business, computer science, psych, nursing, undeclared, mechanical engineering, computer science and engineering, criminology, law, society, and economics. Those are the most popular majors. So at UC Irvine, 56% of students who applied to one of these 10. So we're going to be talking a lot in our sessions about, okay, well, what might be your end goal? You do not need to know what you want your career to be, right? Ooh, sorry about the typo on that too. Sorry. Ooh. You are going to be choosing some top majors, right? Because you're going to have to choose them on the application. Now, are you tied to it when you apply to it? Not necessarily. And for most cases, no. But many of the colleges are going to ask you questions about what you want to study. And we're going to get to that in a little bit. So it's important that you've narrowed it down a little bit. And we're going to have you doing a lot of research on the majors at different schools. And also looking for alternative paths, because a lot of times students come in and they say they want to do business because they haven't thought about it. Like, it just seems like the easiest. Or psych, like that's a super, a great degree that covers a lot of bases, right? We're hoping you're going to be a little bit more thoughtful, and we'll start to think about like, okay, is this really the right move? And if it's the right move, it's the right move. If you really want to do mechanical engineering, we're not going to recommend that you change, designating mechanical engineering. But if you want to do psych and you want to go to Cal Poly, I can tell you this, it has the lowest acceptance rate of any major at Cal Poly. So you really want to know that you want to go do psych because it will affect your admission. So those are some of the things we're going to be talking about, and I hope you're talking about them at home too. In terms of testing, this is kind of, I'm going to breeze through this because I just want to keep moving. Schools that require MIT, Georgia, Tennessee, Georgetown, Florida, the Naval Academy, West Point, Georgia Tech. We know those for sure. We know for sure that University of California, Cal State, University of San Diego are test blind, right? They don't look at them at all. We also know the purple box, permanently test optional, because they were test optional prior to the pandemic. Okay. I feel very confident those schools are going to keep, and these are just a smattering, obviously not all schools. What we have on the right is that there are schools that had this test cycle that are ending, right? So SMU, Columbia, Vanderbilt, right? They said they would be test optional through 2024. We do not know yet whether they're going to require a test. Colleges that we've kind of seen something or have an inkling, like it might happen, right? They might not be test optional. Boston College, because last year they said they were going to require tests and then they took it back. So we don't know what's going to happen. Place like Tulane, USC, we don't know if it's going to happen. It's why we give the advice to have a test, right? It's an opportunity to show a strength. We think everyone should have a test. Again, talk with your counselor if you're thinking about not doing a test. There are also reasons for students not to do testing at all, right? But you certainly have to do testing if you want one of those schools that requires tests. Okay. College list. Spending a lot of time here in the next few months. You have mostly completed your initial college research. We're working on determining your values. We're going deeper, right? Starting to look at majors and activities and things like that. We'll start to think about balancing it and also thinking about early action, early decision, and early decision too, right? The strategy comes later in the summer. Your job now is to be researching, visiting, thinking, to try to get to that balanced college list. This is super general, but we like to give everybody just kind of a snapshot. A balanced college list would have 1 to 2, maybe 3 lottery schools, which means schools that have less than a 12% acceptance rate, right? 1 to 3 reach schools, which kind of for your solid, good student, pretty much A student, those reaches are going to be in the 12 to 30%. Targets are usually somewhere around 35% to 60%. But again, some students' targets will be at 25%. That will go through with each individual student. And then likely schools are basically for everybody greater than 65%. Our goal is if you do good research, and we talk a lot about it, once we balance your list, you should have 12 to 14 schools on it. Now, if you're going to apply to all the UCs, like we don't count them as 7 schools, right? So usually the UCs and the Cal States count as 1 each. So, but we're trying to get to 12 to 14 because having done this a very, very, very long time and recognizing what is happening in terms of how hard it is to fill out these applications, that seems like the sweet spot of what students can accomplish. Okay, the writing part. Here are some questions, and let me tell you, I didn't pull these from, super duper highly selective schools. I pulled these from sort of, schools that are in the mid-range. Essay questions. Reflect on a social or community issue that deeply resonates with you. Why is it important to you? And how have you been involved in addressing or raising awareness about it? In order to answer this question, you have to have done something, right? That's what they're asking. What kind of initiative did you take when you saw a problem? Same question, different wording. You have a platform to create change. What is an action or policy you might propose to address an issue of social injustice in your school or local community or on a national or global scale? If you don't have an issue that you care about, these are really hard to answer. So don't be surprised when you come in, especially if you're one of my students, I'm going to be asking you some of these questions. What do you care about? What have you done? And it's not because I think that you're not doing it. It's that we need to talk about it enough. Honestly, a lot of times students are doing it. You're just not thinking of it in this way. So it just takes a lot of discussing, right? And thinking and remembering. And what are students really, really bad at? Remembering things. Okay. So we need to jog your memory and kind of get through to start to figure out what could be answers to these questions. So how we recommend you do this is think, what problems do I see? How can I make things more accessible to all people? How can I promote inclusivity? And what communities do I want to engage with? Start there, right? Then, in terms of what you need to do, keep track of what you're doing on a note on your phone. Get involved in some things outside of your comfort zone, right? College is going to be all outside of your comfort zone. They want to know that you're ready. Connect your interests to projects inside and outside of the classroom. And read your counselor newsletter. A lot of times there's some really cool stuff in there, right? That you could do that would help you in this area. Another type of essay question. Think about an academic subject that inspires you. Describe how you have furthered this interest inside and or outside of the classroom. That's a UC question. Tell us what piques your intellectual curiosity or has helped you understand the world's complexities. Same idea. To answer these questions, we're gonna have to find an academic subject that you're moderately interested in. Okay, so we're gonna start talking about that. And it's also, summer is a great time to think about ways to do that. Okay, so in terms of investigating your academic interests, a lot of this is going to be reiterated in the newsletter, but in the classroom, you can take a class that interests you. If you want to do biotech, add it as your 7th class, right? If you're interested in doing research, talk with your teachers. They often have good ideas. It also really builds great rapport. There's nothing better than going into a teacher and say, you know what, that lecture was fascinating. If I wanted to learn more, where should I go? Right? Not a bad thing. It like makes the teacher's day. So they want to help and they want kids to be interested in what they're teaching. Collaborate with a teacher on a project, try a community college course, focus your papers that you're doing this semester on topics that interest you or a particular area. Become a TA. Those are all things that you could do sort of in that area. Outside the classroom, honestly, you can just read a book. You can interview people who are doing things that you might be interested in doing. You can watch a TED Talk. You can listen to a podcast. You get a job. You can attend a summer program. There are so many options. You just have to start thinking about them. And they're not super time consuming, right? I'm not asking you to go do 6 hours of, 6 weeks of research on a college campus. A lot of this can be done, but you have to start to get in touch with what parts of your classes you're interested in or what types of majors you might be looking at, right? You can answer an academic question with multiple things that you're interested in. That's okay. You just need to have something that you're interested in. Activities wise, this is probably not the first time you've seen this. This was put together by a group that actually down in Southern California. And the purpose of this, and don't worry, it'll be in the newsletter, so I'll put it back in there so you can look at it more deeply. But the idea is that there's 4 tiers of activities, and for students that are really thinking about wanting to attend highly selective schools, so let's say 15% acceptance rates or lower, right? We're encouraging kids, right, to start to think about tier 2. Okay, so tier 1 is sort of getting involved in some things and enjoying your time. Tier 3 is taking on leadership roles, editor, club president, right? A ton of community service. Tier 2 is thinking about things on a regional level, right? Considerable commitment and success at the state level. So if you want to think about or want to go to a highly selective school, we're going to have to be thinking about where you are on this, right? And what you might want to do for the next level. I want to be very clear with highly selective schools. It's a lot of it is a crapshoot, right? But we have to start thinking about them in terms of Stanford has a 5%. I'm going to use Stanford as an example. Stanford has a 5% admit rate. What that means is that Stanford has a 95% rejection rate, right? Out of 100 kids, if you had 100 kids on a football field, they're only choosing 5 of them. If they wanted to admit every student with perfect SATs, they could fill their class fivefold, if not more. If they wanted to admit every valedictorian from across the United States, right? Again, they could fill their class multiple times over. There are a lot of qualified students, and not like that one thing is not going to get you in having a perfect test score or being valedictorian. Right? So this is something that starts to help students understand the differentiating principles in terms of involvement. Our most successful students, right, focus on their interest and their path, right? All we're asking is to choose an activity and sort of develop it. Grow a little in that activity. Again, go outside of your comfort zone. Choose an academic interest you can explore inside and outside of the classroom. Do you have to do this? Absolutely not. You don't have to. You can still get into college. But I gotta tell you, if you do, the writing process and putting your applications together is going to be much, much easier. Right? And then think about what you can do to improve your community. Right? The first part is thinking about it. And then come to us. We have a ton of ideas, right? But you have to help us figure out what kind of ideas you want from us. Be yourself, find your unique perspective, explore your talents. Okay. The last part of this, I was going to talk about demonstrated interest, right? Which is, I'm just going to go through the first slide really quickly in terms of why we demonstrate interest, right? It goes back to the beginning of the presentation, right? It shows colleges that you're truly interested in their institution and that you might attend, right? They are looking, some schools, not all, and we will go over that in your sessions, but they're looking for the probability that you will actually, if admitted, attend. And part of what they're looking at is how much you've engaged with the school. They are looking for a certain yield, right? So they're looking for more certainty in these uncertain times. So what you want is to give them more certainty and engage with them more. Colleges totally vary on how much they care about DI. The highly, highly selective schools don't care. A lot of times it's the target schools and the more foundational schools that care. And you really do have to show them. Students have gotten denied from schools because even though they had way above the qualifications, right, the school didn't think they would come. All right. The next slide is all the things you can do to demonstrate interest. We're not going to worry about that. You don't have a ton of time to do that right now anyway. It'll go out in the February newsletter. So you'll get all that. And also it's on our blog already. But the concept is like, there's not a lot now that everything is very digital, right? You can, from home, you can do a campus visit. You can, you know, attend classes sometimes. Like there's so many opportunities that like there's no excuse for not demonstrating interest, right? It's too easy. It used to just be that you'd have to like send an email or go visit, but there's so many other opportunities now that it's just something that has to be done, but we will certainly prioritize for you. This is not a good slide to have them all come in, right? But these are all different things that you can do to demonstrate interest. Okay, so some things to keep in mind as I'm wrapping up. I do a lot of reading, right? And especially this holiday, I did a lot of reading and listening, podcasts, books, all kinds of things. And there were three things that really stuck out to me. And I just want to I just wanted to share them with people. Achievement is the lifeboat in an uncertain world. And this comes from a book on achievement culture and how that is affecting kids in high school. Okay, so if we think about that, like it isn't necessarily, but that's how it feels, right? If you just achieve more, then you're going to get the results you want and everything's going to be okay, right? And that's a really sort of complex and profound way to be thinking about things. The college process at a high level awards excellence, not those in the process of reaching excellence. And I am here to tell you that many of us are still in the process of reaching excellence, right? Some are on a hyper path, right? And they are achieving excellence at 17. Most are not. But if we look at this, the process is flawed, right? We want to be looking at the long game for you to be happy, successful college students and beyond, right? And there are so many of you that are on the precipice of reaching excellence. And we want to help you gain the skills and get the information so that you continue to move in that direction. But remember that this college process only rewards a very small number and a very small set of skills. Okay, it's very new. We are so hyper-focused on the short-term makers of success, grades, test scores, college acceptances, that we lose sight of the daily routines and habits critical for promoting long-term well-being and financial stability, right? So we're going to be trying to help you with some of those daily routines and habits, right? And our goal really is that we're promoting your long-term well-being, right? This is one process that brings up a lot of stress and anxiety, and there's going to be stress and anxiety in your life. And we are here to help you figure out how you best deal with it, right? And we're happy to do that because we really love our students. Okay. We're going to do it a little bit at a time, right? We want you to schedule meetings, show up to meetings, engage in the process, and spend the equivalent of 30 to 45 minutes a week on college stuff, right? But we've got those workshops. Remember, they're in the chat at the top, and it will also go out in the newsletter. Please sign up. I cannot tell you how valuable the workshops are. And especially if you're in person, we're going to have a lot of folks there to help. So please take advantage of that. It is free. We do not charge hours. It is just a different way to get the work done. Students, I want you to know this. Not knowing what to do is not an excuse. It's a choice. Okay. We are very clear most of the time about what needs to get done, right? If it is not clear, contact us, right? Different counselors have different feelings about text and, emails and things like that. But you can always email us. You can even email us through CounselMore, if you're not sure what to do. We have a Gantt chart. We have shared it with you guys. We will continue to share it with you. It will also be in the newsletter. What needs to get done is all on there. It's also in the assignments we send you, and it's also in monthly emails. Okay? Not knowing what to do is not an excuse. It's a choice. So right now, all we want you to do, schedule your meetings and show up, sign up for the workshops, right? And then review tomorrow's newsletter. Okay? We've totally got this. The reason that you're with College Comm is because we're going to be with you every step of the way. And I would say that the more communication you have with us, whether you're struggling or excelling or have concerns, just keep in contact with us. We want to support you in the best way we can and meet you where you are. And we are super happy to do that. And it's why we love what we do. I'm going to go ahead and let those who need to go, this is the end. These are the end of my slides. Thank you so much for staying and bearing with it. For those who need to go, you can go. I'm going to go move over to the chat and just kind of look at